At the same time, there's still quite a few people in the media who are trying to grapple with the election results. One of them, Sunny Hostin over at The View, her explanation for the big Latino shift to the right, misogyny, racism. Let's take a listen.
What is wrong with this country that they would choose a message of divisiveness, of xenophobia, of racism, of misogyny over a message of inclusiveness, a message for the people, by the people, of the people?
That is what the problem is. It's the Republican Party.
But the Democrats have always been for the working people.
Exactly. And the Republicans don't care about
I think the message of the Democrats sounded elitist. You don't have value in the society if you don't have a college degree.
That way, but when you look at the proof,
but Joy, it's condescending. It's condescending. There is a
condescending.
The way that the left speaks to its voters. It really is.
A message of joy and inclusiveness?
No, the message of not being educated, being dumb, and what's wrong with America.
Who said that?
Sunny just did.
What is wrong with America?
My point here is that
that's not what Kamala Harris said.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
My point is, I don't blame Joe Biden. I don't blame Kamala Harris. Go back as far as you want. I blame a messaging within the Democratic Party.
You don't blame the Republican Party
Can I just finish my point, please? I obviously have a problem. Anyone has a problem with Donald Trump. The bigger question should be, yes, Sunny, why did they vote for him?
Yes.
In sweeping...
So they need to be introspective.
No, we need to be introspective. If we voted for Kamala Harris, we need to say what didn't resonate with the voters.
So that's where we're currently at. And that's just one of many clips that we could have shown you about where things are right now.
There's been a competition to figure out. Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw, there was actually an Onion video about like the race to figure out which minority group to blame for Democratic laws. And I was like, wow, you guys really are meeting the moment with that one. And there's a whole context, like, you know, white people obviously voted for Trump by the largest margin, so they could be to blame. Right. Latino men could be to blame. Young men could be to blame. And it's like, you know, I think it's reasonable to suggest, in fact, I think it's true, that gender in particular plays a real role in electoral politics. But if you are if your instinct is to blame the voters, and not do any sort of reflection on like the multi-billion-dollar consultant grift complex that fails, or the Democratic leadership, which has consistently failed, or the people who circled the wagons around Joe Biden, even though he was on track for a 400 electoral college vote defeat. Like, if that's your instinct, just get out of politics. You're not if you think you're helping the Democrats, like you are not helping the Democrats just by being like, oh, it's because Latinos are sexist. Some of those same Latino men who voted for Donald Trump probably voted for Hillary Clinton back in 2016.
And not some of them, almost all of them did vote, especially in those, like one of the places that she shouted out where Hillary won by 50 and Trump won by now 75 in 2024, literally voted for Hillary, and they actually voted for even higher margins for Barack Obama. So it's like, come on, man, like what are we doing here? This is the whole thing is ludicrous, and it's like you said, this is just a way of not even, look, at a certain point, Sunny is a pundit, right? So maybe that's just like how she, that's how she sees the world, and I guess like, okay, fine. But it's something because that is a obviously ingrained part of the analysis of a lot of the Democratic Party elite. And it's also deeply convenient to the grift complex, to the leadership, and to others, because then it's the voters' fault and it's not our fault.
It's not Kamala, it's not Biden, it's not Pelosi, it's not Schumer, it's not Jamie Harrison.
Yes.
It's the voters. And like I said, like in a sense, I'm sympathetic because I understand that a lot of women looking at, you know, the policy landscape, and of course, Kamala Harris herself being a woman, and people like Nick Fuentes out there being like, yay, your body, my choice forever. Like, I understand that sense of like, wow, maybe this country just hates women. Maybe they just don't really like women. And like I said, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't think gender played any role in this. But you also have to really think about what moves us forward. Who is actually to blame for this state of affairs? And if you're just, you know, voters are irredeemably sexist and racist, then you may as well just throw your hands up and give up, because in the Sunny Hostin worldview, those are like immutable characteristics that can't be changed no matter what. So what are you going to do?
I agree. And look, on the gender point, like you just said, you know, for anybody out there who's like, oh, they just hate women, it's like, no, it's like they think about things very differently than you. And then maybe you need to do a better job of understanding. I mean, I felt that way, right, going into 2022. And I go, who out there is a number one issue is abortion? I was like, you know, what world are we living in? Well, there are a lot of people. Okay, so clearly personally, I'm like, okay, as a man, you know, whatever, for all these people, not really something that I get. So that's not something like, oh, these people only care about themselves. I'm like, all right, I could emotively understand that. Well, you should think about the other way for people out there who are like, well, you know, not necessarily. 1/3 of the people who voted for Donald Trump are pro-choice. A full 30-something% of the people. He won the popular vote in a country where there's some 65-70% approval for Roe versus Wade as the consensus. So how did that happen? Is that because people hate women, or are they multifaceted and they make choices based on a hierarchy of needs and about which and way that they think is most important and what's going to be the most impactful? And so your job is to flip it around and say, here's why this is important. Anyway, let's get to the congressional map, and let's put this up there on the screen because I wanted to give everybody an update. So this is currently where things stand right now. The projected number of seats is 220 seats for Republicans, 215 seats for the Democrats. This honestly might be the most interesting result because it does show Republicans only won, you know, a 2-seat majority there. Yeah. That's kind of a nightmare considering what's been going on right now. All the Mike Johnson, the speaker election, which was crazy, and, you know, Matt Gaetz, and this gives a lot of power to the Marjorie Taylor Greens and of the world. It also actually gives quite a bit of power to some of the swing state Republicans in New York and elsewhere who barely hung on because they are going to, and the reason why I'm saying this is when the policy fights come, this is where you're going to see that flex. So for example, the salt tax and the salt cap and all that, the New Jersey, New York people who, let's be fair, you know, Trump just ran the ballot up dramatically in all of the New England states. Like they're going to have a big bargaining chip for them. They're like, hey, you got to give us something to go back to our people. You're going to see the same in any of the swinging districts. I think in, in Orange County and elsewhere in California, where you saw some swing state races. You're going to see that in Nebraska. I bet you that Don Bacon guy who held on, you know, he's going to, whatever he wants in Omaha, I guarantee you he's going to get. So there's going to be quite a bit of jockeying and stuff like that in the House. And it also will be very precarious for the way things look policy-wise, because even though they do technically have a united government, it will not be how it traditionally is, which is very narrow Senate margin, very big House margin. It's actually going to be flipped. And that has very interesting dynamics because the House is also where all the revenue stuff has to originate from. So you're going to see, you know, taxes, the House Ways and Means Committee, where you have a very, very narrow margin. It will look differently, and a lot of the fights and the choke points are going to be more in the House this time around.
Let's go ahead and put up the Senate projections. We got some final calls in these races, so we now know for sure what the Senate map is going to look like. So in particular, you have Ruben Gallego, who was able to hold on, narrowly win that Arizona Senate race over Carrie Lake. You also have Jackie Rosen over, I always forget the name of her freaking opponent.
Sam Brown.
Sam Brown. Yeah. So I always want to say Scott Brown. It's not the name of that guy from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
Do you mean Biden's ambassador to Australia?
Is that what he
ended up in Australia.
I didn't even remember that. Anyway, whatever. So Jackie Rosen wins a narrow victory in Nevada, which means that, you know, outside of Pennsylvania, which was very close and I think headed to a recount with Bob Casey, but I mean, it looks like McCormick was able to defeat him.
Yeah, I mean, the AP called the race for McCormick already.
Right. I think it is close enough, though, that it triggers a recount very likely.
If they want to, because Casey basically refuses to concede. And so, yeah, there's some beef going on with a lot of the Republicans right now because Josh Shapiro, I think it's up to the governor's discretion, too, because it costs like $2 million if they do want to do a recount. So there's a lot of pressure on Casey to concede from the right. I mean, he doesn't have to if he doesn't want to, but it could be a while until they call it. But
in any case, it looks like McCormick is the one Republican who was able to flip a swing state. Now, Republicans picked up in West Virginia, no surprise, picked up in Montana, and obviously blocked any Democratic, you know, Texas, Florida, Nebraska sort of dreams. But when you look at this, the one thing that could be hopeful for Democrats and a warning sign for Republicans is Trump doesn't have a lot of coattails. You know, Republicans narrowly hold on to the House, make only one very close gain in terms of a swing state in the Senate. And, you know, the people who, like Carrie Lake, who were the most sort of like Trumpian in their approach to politics, they haven't fared particularly well. Like, he is a singularly unique figure. And now, assuming that there isn't a constitutional amendment, this will be his last term in office. So one of the questions for Republicans is if this politics holds up post-Trump. And there are some parallels with Democrats under Obama.
Yes.
So there were a bunch, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of people who voted for Donald Trump and then just left the rest of the ballot empty, which is how people like Jackie Rose and Ruben Gallardo are able to get over the top, is basically people who voted only for Trump and no one else. Democrats faced a similar dynamic under Obama, where you'd have people who were like, yes to Barack Obama, and I don't care about anything else. And we know that with Obama, while he was very good at getting himself elected and, you know, had some coattails as well, especially in 2008, he had huge coattails. He ultimately ended up being very damaging for the Democratic Party. That's when you saw massive losses in rural districts and areas. They lost the House, they lost the Senate, and of course, they hand the presidency over to Donald Trump post-Obama. So, you know, I don't want to do like, my monologue today is about how doomed Democrats are, so I'm not doing a cope here, but there is a question mark about how much this politics translates into the future when you do not have the singularly charismatic figure of Donald Trump at the top of the ticket. I think he outperformed every Republican Senate candidate in the country, save for Larry Hogan in Maryland.
Yes, it's crazy.
That was the only person I think that outperformed him.
Yeah, that's right, and which makes sense. And you know, he's a Republican running in a blue state where he's already popular, so it's pretty different. But yeah, I mean,
he was governor of the state. He really tried to like be very moderate, et cetera, et cetera.
Which, by the way, how did that work out for him? It didn't work out.
Well, he outperformed Trump.
Yeah, I guess. Still lost. I mean,
kept him in the hunt, I guess.
I am fascinated to see this in 2026, because that is where usually thermostatic public opinion, you have a big shift against the ruling party, and you're going to have a blowout election. When you already have the House right now where it is, it will be almost, I mean, I wouldn't say certainly, nothing is certain, but you know, it looks likely that the Democrats would be able to reclaim it. From what this map I looked at, the Senate is not in danger of flipping right now in 2026. Some truly crazy stuff would have to happen. That said, crazy stuff has happened. Let's think back. 2 Democrats from Georgia. That's never going to happen, right? Well, what's the world that we're living in right now? So, of course, things can change. Everybody said in 2004 that the Democrats were dead. They'll never win again. 2006 was a freaking blowout election. So you never know.
Well, and everybody said Republicans were dead after 2008.
Right. And I mean, to be fair, they kind of were dead for a while, but then they came back.
It was such a massive victory for Barack Obama. I mean, he won freaking Indiana, North Carolina. Huge coattail. There were all kinds of Democratic candidates who were running like totally obscure long shot campaigns with basically no funding. And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, I won. What the hell?
Yeah.
It was
Perriello.
That
was
was
his
exactly
name?
what I was thinking about in Virginia, representing like the Charlottesville area. And it was people like that. Glenn Nye was another one in Virginia. I just happen to know the Virginia ones well, but down in Virginia Beach. But yeah, and then 2010 was, in Obama's words, a shellacking. So, you know, we'll see. I'll save some of my commentary also for, you know, it's in my monologue, whatever. I'm not saying Democrats are like electorally doomed. I think they can, you know, I think there's a chance that I think there's a good chance you have a backlash to Trump in 2026. 2028, who knows? Trump won't be on the ballot, so we'll see what approach they take. But, you know, the alarm bells are really ringing loudly because there's been such huge demographic shifts against them. You know, and if they don't stop the bleed, like they will be in a position of being basically a permanent minority, because if you're only winning college-educated voters, like that's only a third of the country.
Yeah, it's a disaster.
You're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, again, in terms of the popular opinion and all that, things change a lot. You know, so I just looked at 1982 was the popular vote margin of Democrats 11.8%. So in 1982, that's crazy.
Well,
in terms
won
of
the House.
With Tip O'Neill and all that. I mean, look.
It was only when Gingrich came in that they lost the House.
That's what I'm saying.
Even throughout the entire
Reagan
years,
administration,
they held on to the House.
Right. So everybody just needs to remember, like, things are not as clean as they may seem in retrospect, and that people in this country can change their mind a lot and wildly. And in fact, you know, the whole divided government thing, which I think is dumb, but there are a lot of voters who like it, right? Because voters are like, well, I like checks and balances. It's like, well, if you're going to vote for a president, don't you want the president to be able to do whatever they want to do? But whatever. People like the idea that not very much is going to change, like a steady hand on the wheel, but not too much. You know, he's somebody in the other side. So we could see a swing in that direction. I will say, if 2026 does go the way that you were talking about, or are going to talk about in your monologue, that is a whole other story, and that would be time for some serious retrospectives as well. So it's possible. It certainly is. I mean, if you don't screw up the economy, if the economy starts doing really well over 2 years, we have no war. If Ukraine gets wrapped up, if we, you know, hostilities in Gaza go down, and you see gas gas prices tick down, and you see the Fed, which is naturally going to cut rates anyway, I could see, you know, a GOP victory that time around. Anything is on the table.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.